Our reading this morning comes from the book of Hebrews, chapter 10. Let us hold fast to the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who has promised is faithful. And let us consider how to provoke one another to love and good deeds, not neglecting to meet together, as the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Good morning, family. I have to say I'm very grateful once again to be up here this morning. I'll take the Sunday before Thanksgiving slot. I'll take any slot that comes up. The worry this week really is time. I have so much to say, so much on my heart. And of course, you start to worry about these things. How long can you go before the congregation's going to check out on you? I have this little habit. I'll be working on it in the office, and I'll yell out to Sarah, "How many words is 15 minutes?" She's got some little formula back there. So according to the Halverson-Cano sermon matrix, my 2,200 words should land about 15 to 20 minutes. I want to start first by welcoming the UCC voices that have participated in this morning's worship. You've met some of my classmates from my UCC History and Polity class. You're going to meet my instructor in just a moment. I want to welcome our friends from the Marshall Islands. Who knew that we had a Marshall Islands UCC meeting here on campus on a regular basis in Plumer Hall? And why has it taken so long to make that introduction? To make my point early, we are part of something bigger than ourselves. I also want to share with you my ongoing discernment seeking ordination within the United Church of Christ. As many of you know, over the summer I was officially accepted as a member in Discernment. MID is the acronym that we use. And here I must tell you again, 52 years of age, another vocational life change seemingly unfolding. If you were there the very first time I ever preached, I'm in search of that pearl of great price, still following that whisper of my heart. And the fact that I'm here at all with you, my family, I must pinch myself for gratitude. Thank you so much. But more importantly, that discernment process, I'm not figuring out and listening to this call in isolation. You are an important part of that process. The local church has a role to play. Pastor Sarah, my mid-committee, my mid-advisors, and each of you have a role to play as I journey this course, offering reflections and suggestions, feedback, holding me accountable, being a shoulder to cry on if I need to, calling me out on my stuff if I need to be called out. Some of you are already quite comfortable doing that. Pat Sauter, are you in the house? I called her earlier this week to say, "You're in my sermon." One of the tools used in assessing this call and my progress are what are called the 8 marks of authorized and effective ministers. The 8 marks, the qualities or characteristics that one would expect to see in an ordained pastor. And so over the next year, I'm working on a portfolio of reflections and written work and creative activity, demonstrations of my work within these 8 marks, showing my effectiveness or ineffectiveness. One of those 8 marks is nurturing UCC identity. And it's that mark, in conjunction with my classmates and my teachers and each of you and our friends from the Marshall Islands, which have inspired this morning's sermon to celebrate our tradition, our history, its identity. I'd like to start with a little dialogical preaching. So back and forth. Don't be shy, but raise your hand nice and high that we can all see If you can name all 4 Christian denominations that came together to form the United Church of Christ. If you can name all 4, raise your hand. Sue Ellen Rao. What about 3? What about 2? Getting there. 1? All right. Who can name our current president and general minister of the United Church of Christ? Who can name when and where these 4 denominations came together? I believe that is correct. Who can name the 5th stream? Pastor Tamika spoke of the 5th stream. Who knows what the 5th stream of the United Church of Christ is? Who can name what conference we are a part of and who is our conference minister? Tom, if you didn't raise your hand there, I was... Who can name the 2 recognized sacraments within the United Church of Christ? Last question. Who has collaborated with or partnered with a sister UCC in some way in the last 5 years? Okay. I think it's safe to say that you were just like me before this class. I knew practically nothing. I remember 15 years ago when I joined this church that somewhere in my welcome packet there was a little flow chart that explained the denominational threads which constituted the UCC. But since then, I've really given it little to no thought, and I've given it no action in 15 years. So imagine my surprise to take this class. It was like a blindfold removed, awakened from a slumber, and I was learning so much fabulous, interesting, wonderful content. I would be hard-pressed to tell you any single class I've had in my entire educational career, and I've had quite the educational career, that was so transformational. It has deepened my faith, it has enriched my personal identity, and it has got me excited and passionate to share with you. I swear to goodness, it was like Willy Wonka, the 80s version with Gene Wilder, where they go down the little tunnel and then a little piano lock and then it opens up, and what do they have before them? This world of completely edible stuff. Colors. Wow. World of pure imagination. Side note, for my final project in that class, I had to develop a 5-week course covering all the content to be offered to the congregation. And there's so much stuff, not enough time to talk about it today, but if today anything about it resonates, excites you, elicits your own passion, I'll hope you will join me for that course in 2025. But how do we focus now all this content over 2 weeks? I was hard-pressed to figure out what was the single thing I wanted to talk about. But after some debate and wrestling with myself, I landed on covenant. Covenant is where I want to spend the rest of my time. What is covenant? Where does it come from? What does it mean? Is it something that means something to us ourselves? Are we in covenant with each other? Yes. We are. My source material is a book. I had planned to have it here. Reverend Jane Fissler Hoffman, called Covenant. It is a staple within the UCC. And ministers in development and leadership, it's hard to escape this book. Reverend Hoffman is a celebrity status of somewhat in the UCC. It's her book that I'm drawing upon today. She starts with explaining covenant as we understand it in the Old Testament. And in the Old Testament, the concept, it's a series of divine promises that establish the relationship between God and God's people, Israel. Starts early on with Adam and Eve. Here's this garden, enjoy it, but whatever you do, don't eat from that tree. We have a covenant with Noah after the destruction of creation, a promise never to do it again, rainbow. A covenant with Abraham and his descendants and a promise of a land called their own. We have Moses. Now we have the law brought in, but a promise to Moses. Remove thy sandals, thy stand on holy ground. The Charleston Heston version of the Ten Commandments, one of my favorite things growing up. The Davidic comic and his covenant, and the line of David will endure forever. Now the thing about Old Testament covenants, though, they are transactional by nature. The Old Testament covenants, particularly those in the Mosaic covenant, they're often conditional. God promises protection, but it's tied to obedience of the law. And if we know anything about human beings, we're not so good about holding up our side of the agreement. So there's consequences like exile. Come on, Adam, take a bite. It looks so good. Banishment. Well, then we have the New Testament. Jesus is a new covenant. Jesus, his life, his death, his resurrection brings about a transformational experience in our lives, a metanoia, a re-altering of our lives, and it is this faith and relationship with Jesus that is the new covenant. Now the problem here is that, Christianity is going to evolve, and we're going to get into disagreements about the nature of who Jesus is or what Jesus is, salvation, who's in, who's out, do good works matter, or is it faith alone? It's going to become itself problematic. Now I'm going to jump over the Reformation. If you want to know that, take my class. To bring us to, what do we talk about covenant today? What does covenant mean today for us here at IUCC? Let us turn to the comma. Who can tell me? We embrace the comma here at IUCC. Who can tell me what that means? God is still speaking. Quite a few there. God is still speaking. Why put a period when we need to use a comma? And in case you didn't know that God is still speaking, the comma was a national campaign started in 2004 to highlight and emphasize the symbolic nature of God's message is ever changing. We're not confined to interpretations of the past. God continues to speak in and through us as circumstances change. God's story is not done. So if God is still speaking, where do we hear that voice? Where do we hear the voice of God, this still speaking God? It's in community. It's through relationships. It's in participation of this thing called church with each other. God is made real and experienced and made manifest in the 100 little interactions we've already had before we've arrived at this moment here and now. God breathes and moves through us in the murmur of voices at coffee hour, in the echo of the gong, in the extended hands passing offering plates, in shawls knitted with love and care, in comma groups gathering on Saturday night, in the joyful call of bingo numbers, in heartfelt words penned by our advocates, in conversations between deacons setting up on table, every moment a hymn to love and belonging. Covenant is an ongoing dialogue. It's not static, it's evolving. It requires the constant commitment and communication of at least two people. It's unfolding, dynamic, changing and responding to the changing circumstances of not only the community but the world that we live in. It's not transactional by nature, but it does hold us to a certain accountability and responsibility. It's the promise we make to each other. Last moment of dialogical preaching. For my married friends here this morning, or divorced, married friends or divorced, Who remembers their vows and could give a reasonable articulation of those vows? Raise your hand. I was rehearsing in the shower last night thinking, oh, maybe I shouldn't ask this question. Might get some people in trouble. Let me ask you this for everyone. Who remembers their vows of when you joined this church and could give a reasonable articulation of them? Because it's always worth the reminder. It's this. We believe that Jesus is an important force in the universe. How beautifully straightforward. How exquisitely vague. The agnostic side of me says, I'm still with you. Yes, Jesus is an important force in this universe. We are committed to a daily struggle to allow love into our lives and to let us remold us. Daily struggle to allow love in to remold us. We believe ourselves one family. One family committed to making love believable in others. Making believable in others, entrusting in them our talents and our gifts. We covenant with each other to create space where we can share life's experiences. This is the promise we have made for richer or for poorer, in sickness and health, in good times and bad. To quote the lyrics of our song this morning, we are pilgrims on a journey, we are travelers on the road, we are here to help each other go the mile and bear the road. I will weep when you are weeping. When you laugh, I'll laugh with you. I will share with you joy and sorrow until we've seen this journey through. In today's scriptures, we're called to provoke one another to do love and good deeds, not neglecting to meet with one another. Provoking love in you, making love believable in you. One final concept and I'll be done. Another term from class. And I raise this not to shame, but I raise it only to encourage deeper reflection on our covenantal promise with one another. It's an idea I've touched upon before, but I learned the term cruise control Christians. It was in the context of a discussion about the declining numbers faced by mainline Protestant churches. It's so easy to live life on cruise control, to put our Sunday worship on cruise control, so we can set it and forget it. Ron Popeil and his chicken rotisserie thing back in the 80s. Set it and forget it. So that we don't have to work hard when we're on cruise control. It's so easy to go through the motions of Sunday morning church. It's so easy to get here, start to finish, and think, I'm limit myself to polite, political, perfunctory conversations, never really sharing life's experiences. It's so easy at times to sit alongside someone for years and years and years and realize that when we go out into coffee hour, half the people's names I do not know. So easy at times to see the words project on the screen, but they just go over our head, failing to connect with heart and body. When did we last provoke in another person love? Our commitment to our family to shoulder life's burdens and create space to experience life together. Stewardship's wrapping up. It's not a movie ticket. Turn off cruise control. Our ministries, our committees, our leadership needs active voices engaged in the dialogue, hearing the still speaking God. Turn off cruise control. We are surrounded by people that are hurting and suffering and hungry. Turn off cruise control. How do we bring red and blue together? How can we sit down and listen, red and blue together? There's the conversation of the age. Turn off cruise control. In closing, I return to my first point, which is we are part of something bigger than ourselves. Our covenantal promise here in this family extends beyond these walls. We are part of an association. We are part of a conference. We are part of a national church. We are members of the United Church of Christ. So how are we building relationships and expanding our family to the friends here at from the Marshall Islands? How are we provoking love in others to our local churches here in Orange County? How are we sharing our gifts and our talents with the national church? This is a conversation I want to have. We are members of the United Church of Christ. God is still speaking. Be the change. This is my UCC message here this morning. God bless and amen.